The Kevin Durant Warriors were one of the most unstoppable teams in NBA history. After breaking the wins record 2016, Draymond Green decided it would be a good idea to add Kevin Durant to an already historically great team. The team, already consisting of amazing players such as Draymond Green, who was a former Defensive Player of the Year winner, Klay Thompson, one of the greatest shooters in NBA history, and Steph Curry, the greatest shooter in NBA history. At the helm, Steve Kerr. Many know him for his coaching abilities. However, I remember him as the man who saved Michael Jordan's legacy. Adding Kevin Durant to this cocktail made it unfair, as they blew through the league in 2017, winning the championship without much pushback. The same result was expected in 2018, as the team hadn't lost any of its key contributors from the championship team in the year prior. Much was the same to start the playoffs in 2018, only losing 2 games in the first 2 rounds. Little did they know they would be pushed to the brink of elimination by none other than the Houston Rockets. The Rockets were amazing in 2018, after getting embarrassed last year by San Antonio. The Rockets decided it was time to change things up, trading for All-Star point guard Chris Paul. Houston, realizing they were too focused on isolation play, thought the playmaking abilities of Chris Paul would help spread the love to some of the role players. And Houston thought correctly. They not only finished with the best record in the West, but also finished with the best record in the league. Much of this was due to the lights-out shooting from all players on the team. Trevor Ariza, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, Ryan Anderson, even Gerald Green were all elite threats from beyond the arc. However, none of this would have been possible without James Harden. Thanks to Chris Paul taking some of the load off of him dribbling-wise, Harden was able to focus on being a scorer. And this is exactly what he did, averaging 30 points a game and winning MVP. The team led the league in 3-pointers made in the regular season, and, after destroying Minnesota and Utah in the first 2 rounds, the real test was waiting for Houston in the Western Conference Finals. Despite the fact the Rockets were the higher seed, the Warriors entered the series as favorites. However, this series did not project to be a walk in the park for the Warriors, as the Rockets did have some players they could throw at Kevin Durant, such as Trevor Ariza, PJ Tucker, and Luke Mbamute. Although these players could not stop Kevin Durant, they could certainly attempt to slow him down. For as unstoppable as Kevin Durant was, the same questions about how to guard MVP winner James Harden came from Golden State's side. Many pointed at Klay Thompson as the James Harden stopper, but in the heavy pick-and-roll offense of Houston, no one knew what the plan was. Another wrinkle in this story was the rivalry between Chris Paul and Steph Curry. As discussed in a previous video, these 2 players had history going back to Chris Paul's days with the Clippers. With both teams being high-power defenses, this projected to be an amazing series. Game 1 in Houston started off electric, with the Rockets gaining an early 9-point lead and Draymond Green picking up an early technical after shoving James Harden. It appeared the Rockets had the advantage, but the Warriors kept battling, with the score being even at 56 at the half. Unfortunately for Houston, the Warriors got hot in the third quarter, outscoring Houston 31-24 in the quarter, with KD having 13 within this time frame. Houston tried to form one last run in the fourth, but 3 3-pointers from Klay Thompson took the wheels off the bus for Houston. And despite 41 points for Harden, the Rockets fell, losing 119-106. The main story coming out of Game 1 was how Houston had no answers to Kevin Durant. Although on paper they appeared to be fit to take them on, in reality this was not the case at all. Kevin Durant was playing his best basketball of his career and was making everything over everyone. Another factor was the Rockets switching defense oftentimes put a poor defender, such as James Harden, on KD, which was barbecue chicken at the time. The Rockets came out firing on all cylinders to start Game 2. Not only were the stars for the Rockets scoring, but the role players were making magic happen too. Gerald Green sent an early message to the Warriors with this emphatic slam. By the end of the game, Eric Gordon and PJ Tucker made a combined 11 3-pointers on the night. Not only were the Rockets on fire, but the Warriors struggled tremendously. The most notable dub to struggle was Steph Curry, only scoring 16 points on the night. Not only did he struggle from the field, but he got dropped by Chris Paul later in the game. The only Warrior to show up was Kevin Durant, ending the night with 38 points. Despite this performance, the firepower of the Rockets' offense was too much to handle, with Houston tying the series 1-1. The Warriors started Game 3 in Oracle just as the Rockets started Game 2, scorching hot. After struggling in Game 1 and 2 in Houston, Curry finally found his shot, with 3 of his 35 points coming from this three-point jumper over James Harden. Although Houston tried to fight its way into this game, the 19-team turnovers were too much to overcome and the Rockets got embarrassed, losing by 41 points and falling into a 2-1 hole. Up to this point, none of these games were all that dramatic. Well, that changed in Game 4. The Rockets started off terribly, missing their first 8 field goals and going down 0-12. The situation was dire for them at the end of the first, down 28-19. However, to start the second quarter, the Rockets began to settle in and started knocking down their shots. The momentum was completely in the Rockets' hands after James Harden made this in one dunk over Draymond.
Holy shit.
The first half ended with the Rockets up 53-46. With the momentum in the Rockets' hands, the Dubs were in need of a savior. Once again, Curry was amazing in the third, scoring 17 points in that time frame. If only he would have done this in 2016 against the Cavs. Heading into the fourth, the game was extremely competitive, which leads us to the final minute. With Houston up 2, they missed a shot with 12 seconds left. The ball was in the hands of Kevin Durant. Surprisingly, Steve Kerr opted to not call a timeout. What happened after that was truly surprising.
Konnichiwa.
Klay Thompson decided it would be a good idea to take a contested jumper over Trevor Ariza, which of course bricked. The talk after the game was the decision to not draw up a play in that situation. Nonetheless, the Rockets showed they belonged, tying up the series at 2 headed back to Houston. Game 5 was a rock fight throughout, with both teams needing the win. The intensity was high for the entire game. A memorable moment came when Chris Paul's shot clock cheesed Steph Curry, making a three-pointer in his face followed up by him doing a shimmy in his face. With 1 minute remaining, the Rockets were up 1 with the ball in Chris Paul's hands. He drove, did a spin move and missed. However, the real story here is Chris Paul was slow to get up with a hamstring injury. He eventually needed to be checked out of the game. Throughout all of this, the Warriors had the ball with 10 seconds left down 2. Draymond Green got the ball and fumbled it. This secured the win for Houston, giving them a 3-2 lead in the series. They were 1 win away from the NBA Finals. Before the start of Game 6 in Golden State, the Rockets announced Chris Paul would miss the game. The importance of this cannot be understated. Up to this point in the series, Paul was averaging 20 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, and 2 steals per game, as well as providing amazing leadership. The loss of Chris Paul appeared as so it would end the Rockets' chances of making the finals. Even after hearing all this noise, the Rockets came out hot for Game 6. They eventually got out to a 17-point lead after the first quarter, leading 39-22. All was going well for the Rockets. Then, their kryptonite came. The Rockets were outscored 64-25 in the second half. Much of this was thanks to the great effort by the Splash Bros, especially Klay Thompson, who channeled his inner Game 6 Klay, scoring 35 points. The void left by Chris Paul was felt very much so, with the Rockets ending the game with 23 turnovers. The Warriors won 115-86, with a crucial Game 7 taking place in Houston. Once again, Chris Paul was ruled out for Game 7. However, the Rockets needed just a few quarters of good basketball, and they would take down the mighty Warriors. And to start the game, they got a great first 2 quarters. At one point, they led by 15 after this dunk by James Harden. Klay Thompson, who was red hot heading into the game, picked up 3 fouls early in the game. This obviously affected the Warriors, who were down 11 points at halftime. Unfortunately for the Rockets, they had to play the second half. This is when the greatest collapse in NBA history happened, with the Rockets missing 27 straight three-pointers. Even though the three-pointers weren't falling, the Rockets kept doing what they always do, which costed them a championship. This illegal screen by Jordan Bell just added weight to the crush of the Rockets. Eventually, PJ Tucker made a three-pointer, but it was all too late. The Warriors won the game 101-92, making it to the NBA Finals. The Warriors would have ended up losing the finals to the GOAT LeBron James, but J.R. Smith had other plans. holding onto the ball for no reason, which made LeBron so angry that he broke his hand. This would be the third championship of the Warriors' run. It would also be the last championship the Warriors would win with Kevin Durant, who would get flipped to Brooklyn for D'Angelo Russell and Shabazz Napier. For the Rockets, the story doesn't have much of a happy ending. The Rockets ran it back with much of the same team minus Trevor Ariza and Luc Mbamute. They finished as the 4th seed in the West, but once again met with the Warriors in the playoffs. They would lose to them in 6 games. It was clear that the Rockets didn't have the players to stop Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. After this series, Chris Paul, with some draft picks, would be traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Russell Westbrook. This trade would end up being a disaster for the Rockets, as they had no picks or salary due to the trade. They made one last desperation move, trading their only center for another wing. This didn't work and the Rockets would lose in 5 to the Lakers in the bubble. The team was blown up after this, with the Rockets trading James Harden to the Brooklyn Nets for a bunch of teenagers. The NBA is filled with what-ifs. What if Derrick Rose didn't injure his knee? What if Jordan didn't retire to avoid Hakeem because he was scared? And what if Chris Paul didn't injure his hamstring? Although it is not a 100% certainty the Rockets would have won the series, it is much more likely if they had Chris Paul on the floor. This one what if changed the legacy of Chris Paul and James Harden. If these players had rings, where would they rank all time? Would they still be known as playoff chokers? For these reasons, the 2018 Western Conference playoffs will go down as one of the greatest what-ifs in NBA history.